In the world of entrepreneurship, we dream about the big exit. We talk about mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, etc. But there's one exit strategy that's often whispered about: selling to private equity. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on this mysterious world with someone who's not only been through it, but has come out the other side a fan. Alexis Sikorsky is the founder of a software development company called New Access. After 20 years of running it, he exited his company by selling it to private equity for £100 million. He's seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of private equity deals, and he loves it. Because PE is a game, and if you want to make it work for you, you just need to know the rules. From the importance of your numbers to the art of making your business look its best, Alexis is going to walk us through the details of preparing for a private equity exit. He'll share insider tips on how to maximize your company's value, navigate the complex world of deal making, and avoid the common pitfalls that can derail even the most promising deals. You probably, like me, aren't planning on selling a business for 9 figures tomorrow, but by knowing what options you have now, you can better position yourself for when you're ready. Whether you're a founder dreaming of your big payday, or you're just curious about how the PE world really works, I think you're going to love this episode. So, let's get into it. So, very relevantly, as I was discussing with the guys, I come from so I've got a consumer business as well. Private equity is absolutely one of the potential options for us. I haven't heard much good stuff about it. So I'm taking the reason I'm interested in this interview particularly is I'm genuinely here to learn. So the way that this interview hopefully flows is like a normal conversation. You are someone smart who knows the space and has researched it well. And I actually am a literal perfect person to be asking these questions because this is absolutely the path for me.
I'm more than research it. I actually live it in my flesh. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's,
exactly. Yeah. And I've rarely heard good things. I haven't heard I'm not saying I've just heard terrible things. Like we'll discuss it, but I've never yet heard someone go, private equity is bloody brilliant for your business, which is essentially what you're doing. And I haven't yet heard that. Yeah. So I'm really excited to discuss that. So let's start.
I'm ready.
Okay. A lot of entrepreneurs talk about exits, right? You don't necessarily think about it when you start, but it's always on your mind. Why is selling to private equity the thing? Like, why is that specific topic in its own sphere of interest versus just exiting in general?
Let's get back 30 years. Okay, 30 years ago, you basically didn't have private equity. So you're an entrepreneur. You have, whether it's a lifestyle business, a growth business, whether it's big or it's small, usually you wouldn't exit before you retire, right? That was your natural exit, you retire. And believe me, being through that, you want to retire early because you're tired. It's exhausting, you know that as well as I do. So what are your options? Basically, your option is leaving your company to your kids. If you have lucky enough or unlucky enough to have kids who can take over the business.
Who want to.
Oh, and want to. And, well, there is no real reason to think that entrepreneurship quality goes in the blood, right? So want to, are trained for and capable for, which is a lot. So your option is basically sell to the market, right? Is sell to a competitor or mainly sell to a competitor. You call that a strategic sell. The problem with strategic sell, it's very imbalanced negotiation, right? If you are a mid to small entrepreneur, you have tons of competitor. And the big guys, there's what, 4, 5, 6 of them? How many Googles are there to buy you? So they tend to make you feel like crap. Negotiation is really not in your favor. And they want to buy you cheap. They want to get rid of you as soon as possible and all of your friends. And it's a difficult, tough situation. Now come private equity to the scene. So there are guys that have very, very clear goal. They want to buy your company because basically they like what you're doing. They think you're making a profit. Well, because if you're not making a profit, you're not selling to private equity, mostly. And they think they can help you make more profit. And suddenly you have 500 private equity who can buy you. So suddenly you become a rarity. Like, you're an entrepreneur, you know that, right? You receive email or phone call from private equity once a week, right? Because they have so much money to deploy, and it's not that many. They have a sweet spot in terms of location. They have a sweet spot in terms of investment size, in terms of market, in terms of how the company is run. So if you go all the criteria from this guy, finally they don't find that many to buy.
What is private equity? You say there's so many of them. Let's define it. What does it really mean? What is a typical? How does one start a private equity, and like, why are there so many of them?
Okay, private equity. Well, private equity is more than what I describe as private equity, because you have like private equity who will buy an airport, and you have very big private equity. But the one we're dealing with is private equity that specialize in LBO. Leverage buyout, which means they're going to use their investors' money plus bank money to acquire a company. They will take a majority share of the company and usually leave the founders and management team in place with a minority position.
What does that typically look like? Majority, minority. I know it's how long's a piece of string, but what are typical?
My case, actually it's pretty typical. My case is they bought 77 and left the management team with 23%. That's pretty common. They will rarely take less than 2/3 and rarely more than 80%, I would say. So now it's pretty typical. You keep between 20 and 25, 30, and that's a negotiation, right? So, yeah.
Okay, so like, what are they? As in that's sort of like how the money is, so to speak. But like, how does one set up a private equity? What is that kind of organization? I know it sounds like a very basic question, but in the startup world, especially the startup world, right? So you're early in your journey and stuff. You start to understand angel investors, SEIS, EIS, venture capital, like all these things. You start to understand the market a little bit. And then on the exit side, there's these few things that you sort of broadly understand: IPO, selling to a company, failing. And then there's like obviously M&A and private equity. What is that? So we know what a VC fund is, but what is a private equity?
Well, first of all, congrats if you understand the angel and VC worlds, because it's going to be the topic of my next book, and it's very, very complicated. Actually, private equity is pretty simple.
Okay.
Private equity is a company who raise a bunch of money, usually mid-size. So for instance, the private equity who acquired me had a first fund of 100 million. I was part of the second fund that had 400 million, and after they sold me, or while they were selling my company, they raised their first €1 billion fund. So mid-size, usually between 100 million to $1 billion, I would say. Leave alone the KKR and the giants, but usually that's the guy you will deal with. So there is that money, mainly with institutional investors, some private, but mainly institutional. So now they're sitting on that pot of money, and they will deploy 8 to 12 per fund. So if you fund this 100 million, their sweet spot will be 8 to 12 million, right? And
So deploying 8 to 12 million
per acquisition.
Yeah, so
they would make 8 to 10.
So they'd be looking to invest, call it 10. They'd be looking to invest 10.
Yes.
To own 60 to 70% of a company.
Yes, but keep in mind that with their 10, they're going to borrow 40. So that means their sweet spot will be 50 million.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
The size of the deal will be 50 million. So that's private equity. Private equity is usually organized with a few guys, 4 or 5, who are the GPs, who are the owners of the fund, who each have their specialty. and they tend to get involved. So that means when you get acquired by a private equity, you have a guy, in my case, they were called participation director, which means that's the guy who is in charge of the day-to-day of running your company, and you have the GP who will be in charge of doing the board meeting once a month.
And GP is general partner.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. So it's very interesting. Like, we'll probably discuss that later, but private equity do massive due diligence on you. And one of the reasons entrepreneurs are scared of PE because they don't do their due diligence on the private equity, right? At the end of the day, you end up working with two individuals. The guy you talk to on a weekly basis or sometimes even on a daily basis, and the general partner who's going to be basically your boss. And like, the least you can do is meet with these people. Like, the first question you ask is, who's going to be my participation director? Who's going to be my GP? Because at the end of the day, they're people. So the quality of the relationship will depend on the quality of the people.
And the participation director is kind of your new boss or not? Is that a way to think about it?
No, the GP is your new boss. The participation director will act more like your colleague.
Right.
But my participation director, which is still a very close friend and got interviewed in my book and everything, we would talk probably once a day. And he was in Paris, I was in Geneva. It's not one time I'll go to Paris and not grab a beer with him, or he'll come to Geneva. He would usually come to Geneva like 2 or 3 times a month. So he's more your colleague. The guy who's actually acting like your boss is your GP.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about due diligence then. What does good look like? What are the things that you categorically need founders to know that they have to do? What are the absolute core basics?
It's actually so easy, and I don't understand why people make that complicated. So how would you do your due diligence for anybody you work with, right? So first of all, you meet with the guys. Talk to them outside of just deals conversation, know who they are as human beings. And by the way, they're going to be completely okay with that. You actually tell them, you said, in this process, if we end up signing a deal, you're going to do a massive due diligence on my company. So I'm going to do a due diligence on your company. They're going to probably appreciate that. By the way, I didn't do any of that. So it's knowledge I acquired later in life. I wish I did. I got lucky. So first, talk to the people, know them, and ask them questions. One of the good questions you ask is, how much freedom will I get as a CEO? That's just ask the question. Will you give me kind of a road book? This is where I want you to go and let you work, or will you be on my ass every day for details? And they will probably tell you that. You can also ask them, okay, now you met with my management team, who is going? Who do you think is not cut for this job? That's a very important question.
Are they always really honest about this stuff?
No.
By the way? Yeah.
No.
So a lot of this feels like performative theatrics, right?
No, it's a bit more than that. They're not always completely honest, but well, I have a fundamental belief in human nature. So I think you end up knowing. In my case, it was very, very clear. They'll be super honest. They say you don't have a CFO, which is absolutely right. So say you're going to need a CFO. Apart from that, I love your guys. That's why we're buying. And it turned out to be mostly true. But that's okay. That's the purely conversational time. But then the best thing is to talk to people they've done business with. So what the way I would do it now, again, I didn't do any of that, but the way I would do it now is ask them for 5 names of company they acquired, of founders of company they acquired, and say, I want to do a due diligence. Can you give me 5 names? They will give you 5 names. No problem. You're obviously not going to call any of these people because it makes no sense. And you find the other 5. It's usually pretty easy to find who they acquire. It's on their website. And then you LinkedIn and call the CEOs and founders of this company and say, how did it happen?
So for clarity, what you're saying is you ask them for 5 names, and then you, with your skeptical, cynical, slightly aware entrepreneurial mind, know that that'll be the best 5 that they'll probably give you, and therefore you ignore it. But you've essentially told them that you're going to be contacting all people, and so you're using your initiative ultimately to find better ones.
By the way, that's exactly what a good private equity will do when they do your client due diligence.
Isn't there an argument to say, so for example, when you're doing like interview techniques, and there's a great book called Who that I use to do my interview techniques at Heights, and the thing that they ask you to do in references, or that they suggest that you do in references in the book, is literally tell me someone who is going to give you a great reference, someone who you don't think will give you a great reference, and someone you're not really that sure about, which is really interesting because almost everyone can, if they're really honest, think about those 3 answers, not on the spot, but in general, and it provides a lot of introspection. And that could be quite an interesting way to do it with them, because you actually have to make them name someone who it hasn't been a good relationship with.
That's a good idea, actually. But in that case, keep in mind, like, you're not talking to hundreds of company, right? So if they do 10 per fund, if you get the last 10, you'll have a pretty good vision, right? So it's 10 phone calls. And by the way, people will answer. People love telling their stories. We know that, right? So you call and say, hey, I'm getting acquired by PX. I know they acquired you. Can you spend half an hour? I never heard of somebody saying no to that. They love telling you the story.
Yeah.
And also, especially if they're pissed with them.
Yeah,
they love telling it even more.
So what happens if you do your due diligence on all the available acquirers in PE and they all turn out to be arseholes?
There's 500 of them, so it's not
500
happening.
arseholes is possible.
Well, it's
So, and also, where does this 500 come from? Is that a fact?
I don't know. No, it's not a fact. No, it's not a fact.
Do you know how many private equities there actually are in Europe, for example, that are in the market available?
No,
to
I don't.
buy
But that's a
companies?
very good question.
Yeah.
You should do some research on that. It's a reputation game, right? It's like saying I don't know where to eat because all the restaurants are bad. Like it's mainly a reputation game for these guys. I'll give you an example. That's a very, very clear example. One of the private equity trick, which is brilliant, it works every time, is I want to buy your company and I'm going to say I'm going to acquire you for 100 million. And after that, we go to 6 months of stuff, due diligence, legal, negotiation. I call it 6 months colonoscopy. And what's happened in your mind during that time? For me, I'm good. I'm happy. I have staff to do that. That's what I do.
Yeah, that's your job anyway,
That's
right?
my job. That's what I do. It's not what you do. So what's happened in your brain? It's happened multiple things. First, you want to kill me multiple times. So I'll have to quiet you down. But I'm happy. I'm very good at that. Then you're not running your company for 6 months, by the way, because you're dealing with private equity.
Yeah, which, by the way, obviously is the same with fundraising and VC. One of the good bull cases for having co-founders is one of you can focus on that and the other one can focus on the business. But obviously, for a lot of people, sole founders or whatever, it's this big ironic situation where you need to do the best performance of your life at the same time you can't be running the business.
Absolute catch-22.
Yeah, exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
And another thing is going to happen in your mind is you're going to start spending the money. Either if you're a very reasonable guy, start spending it in your mind, and if you're like me,
Your personal money or
no, the money you're going to get, the 100 million
that you haven't yet got? Oh, I see. On growth, you mean? On growth.
Yeah.
On making sure that you're hitting targets and...
No. That's not money for the company, right? You're selling. That's money for you.
Right.
So you as a human being, as a founder who's been like, most founder has been grinding for decades before they get to that point. Yeah. And like suddenly they're going to have 60 million hit their bank account. I dare you not to start, at least in your mind, spending it. Or if you're like me, spending it in real life. Like, I can buy the new car now. I'll get 60 million in 6 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then you got to end of due diligence. Your private equity say, by the way, it's not going to be 100 million. It's going to be 80. Because X and X and X bullshit reason. A friend of mine call it brilliant. They call it fish and chip. They fish you with 100 million and then they chip away off the money. That's brilliant. So that's a very, very common technique. It's something you should address with them at the beginning and tell them that's not going to work on me. This is the number. And unless there is a very valid reason, there is no valid reason, right? Because your company. So unless there is a valid reason, I'm not going to accept 95. So do not spend $1 million in due diligence if you think you're going to screw me for 10 million at the end, because it's not going to work. At least you tell them you're aware.
Yeah.
So that's the first question you ask when you do your due diligence. Do they fish and chip?
Yeah, so what's interesting here is you're making it sound like sometimes this is as simple as having some self-respect, some awareness, and drawing clear lines of boundaries up front in a negotiation that you're not a pushover, which is interesting because in theory, these things should almost be assumed as an entrepreneur from a buyer, especially from what you've just said, which is, this is a reputation game, they do multiple deals like this, like blah, 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 blah. Yet, if I was selling my company for 100 and then they said 80 on the last day or whatever, at some point during the negotiation, it completely screws my love for this deal. Even though it's a great amount of money and all of the things, no one likes to feel taken advantage of. So even if it was 99, to your point, it's like, why do that? You're trying to, it's like a psychological trick, right? And it's not really about the money. It's about the common decency between two people in an authentic negotiation where I need to take you as a partner at face value on what you're saying the same way as we should, because it's going to be a business relationship and partnership. And now I feel like I can't trust you. I can't understand the psychology of that at all. And it sounds to me a little bit like it's almost just for the love of the game. Do you know what I mean? As in that they will try just to see if it's possible.
So that's a very common mistake. It's like, I don't know, like interacting with your computer and thinking it has human reactions. Private equity are all about the money. That you need to understand that, and you need to understand that early. They don't care. They don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your staff feelings. They don't care about your client feeling. They don't care about their staff feeling. It's a money game. If they buy 100 million company for 90, they make an extra 10%, which is a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Because for you, it's just 10% less. For them, with all the calculation of revenues and everything, it's a lot. Because keep in mind, they're financing 80% of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually very smart to do, because you're going to be pissed at them. They don't care. You're not going to trust them. They don't care. You work for them. Like you need to understand. I love private equity because I love that their goals and targets are really, really clear. They want to make a multiple on their money, on the money they invest for their investors, and nothing else matters. And that's very, very different. And that's actually a big cultural thing when you deal with these people, right? When you are a founder, especially if a mid-size, when I sold, the company was maybe 300 employees. These guys are your family, right? Like you've been through a lot with them. The company was 20 years old. Some of them were literally my family. You know what I mean? They don't give a flying, they don't care. There are numbers on an Excel spreadsheet. And they do care about staff morale. That's something they will talk about. But as a tool, we want them to be reasonably happy so they don't leave and they work properly. Apart from that, they don't care. So these negotiation technique, they really, really don't care if you don't like them.
What do you think of common misconceptions then? So I've said my side, I haven't necessarily heard good things about private equity. Maybe it is because of the emotional side as well. What do you think most common misconceptions are then from founders?
Most common misconception is they're going to acquire your company and fire you. That does happen.
Yeah.
But it's the last thing they like to do.
What does happen if they do?
They put another CEO.
Can we, in the context of that question, actually, let's talk about a theoretical deal.
Yeah.
Let's say they buy your company for 100 million.
Yeah.
It's a round number.
Yeah.
In this scenario, they invest probably 20 and borrow 80. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and they will probably own about 78% or whatever, 80%, let's call it, right? And so you as the founders have fully exited. Actually, let's start there. How does that work financially then for the founders? Let's say the founders between you two, for simple maths again, let's just say that you own 50% and your investors own 50%.
So they will buy 100% of all your investors.
Right.
And they're going to buy 30% of your shares.
Right.
So your investor will get 50, you'll get 30. That's how it would work.
Got it.
They'll be very unlikely to keep a non-active investor on board. On an management buyout, they usually get rid of all the small investors, which is, by the way, very beginning, day one of your company, you think about, first of all, having the cleanest cap table as possible, so as little investors as possible. Do not give this half-a-person deals, right? Oh, you're going to do my website and you get 0.5% of the company. Do not do that, because I've seen big and good deals being cancelled because of that.
Why?
Well, the last thing they want is to have minority shareholders who are pain in the ass. So I own 5%.
But they're buying them out though, no?
Yeah, if they want to.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And then everybody said, and that's really super common, like, oh, don't worry, I have a drag along, tag along, I have a shareholder. Yeah, sure. If they sign. So I just had this conversation with a client who has like a guy in his cap table who hates him and they're fighting. And I told him, I cannot sell your company right now. You have to solve. So why? He has a drag along, tag along. So I say, yeah, okay, let me describe you the situation. The private equity will give a letter of intent. You're going to go through all the negotiation, the 6 months colonoscopy, everything. You get to signing the deal and the guy say, I don't sign. What do you do? Well, I have a drag along. Yeah, you have a drag along. So you go to court, right? And that's a 2 years process before the guy puts his signature on the piece of paper. So one of the things the private equity will absolutely have a conversation with every shareholder to be sure everybody is on board. So going back to your example, all the investors will get 50 million, you'll get 30. And then you'll still own 20% of the shares.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. And when we come back, we'll dive into the crucial distinction between growth and lifestyle companies and how this choice impacts your exit strategy. We'll also explore Alexis' Apex model for preparing your company for a private equity exit. We'll be right back. I'm going to level with you. I'm not the best manager in the world. I'm a decent coach, but management is my co-founder's thing, not mine. And thank God for that, because developing your team is one of the single most high leverage things you can do as a leader. Which is why I'm really happy we're working with Personio. They're the all-in-one HR platform you need to handle everything, from hiring to onboarding, handling absences to managing compensation. Their features touch every point of the employee lifecycle, from onboarding right through to exit interviews. And because they automate so much of the boring but necessary HR admin, you and your managers can focus on getting the best out of your people. So, if you're leading a growing business and want to spend less time on HR admin, then book a demo at personio.com/secret leaders. That's personio.com/secret leaders. There's a link in the show notes. So, in what circumstances then, because we're talking about misconceptions, so here's my misconception, or my conception, is of that 20% that I'm still in, and I'm running the company, I believe that the private equity is trying to fuck me over every single moment that they possibly can to fire me early, to cancel my shares, to take my 20%. Well, is that true, or is that paranoid?
No, because firing you will have no impact on your shares, right? You still own the shares.
Yeah, I don't know. That's actually what I'm wondering. Is this stuff conditional, or it's like you are the shareholder anyway?
No, you are the shareholder.
Right, okay.
No. There's no. The condition you can have is... part of your earnout will be based on performance, and part of the earnout will be based on the fact that you're actually staying on board. Right. So sometimes they do what's called a bad leaver clause. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you quit, you won't get your earnout, basically. After that, they have nothing on you.
But you won't get your earnout, which is part of the
Initial payment.
The initial payment,
Yeah.
exactly. But your 20% that's
Share is shares, like shares of
yeah.
IBM, right? IBM cannot decide you don't have shares anymore.
Got it. Okay, fine.
So what you're hoping in a deal like that? So again, it's all down to what's your number, right? But what you're hoping in a deal like that is, first of all, the initial payment is enough to hit your number, right? So like how much money you need to live without working.
Do you advise people on what you think that number is from your
I know what
experience?
that number is.
What is that number?
But it's...
You can't say you know what it is and then be like, well...
No, I know
Yeah.
what it is. I'm going to say in the UK.
Right,
In the UK, that number is 40 million.
40?
40.
To never... Personally, you need 40 million to never work again.
Yes.
Fuck me, that makes the UK sound expensive.
Now, I'll tell you why. Basically, universally, pretty much everywhere in the world, you need $1 million per year to live without working.
Right, okay.
That's like school
But
for
$1 million...
kids, nice house, nice vacation. It's expensive to not work.
Yeah.
You'll see.
Okay.
So basically, you need $1 million per year to not work.
You could just drop your ego a bit. Right? $1 million a year is... I mean, yeah, maybe some ridiculous holidays and stuff.
We'll discuss that.
Yeah.
We'll discuss that when
Okay.
you're retired.
Sure.
But like, of course, you can live with
Yeah.
less. I'm not an asshole. But
Yeah.
keep in mind, you're an entrepreneur who brought your company to like 100 million,
get
right?
it.
So you have some kind of habits of
I get it.
expectation. You have staff, you have kids, you have like. So basically, $1 million per year. So in the UK, you need to make double that because the taxman will take half.
Yeah.
So basically 40 million at 5% will give you 2 million revenue per year. And one goes to the taxman, one goes to your lifestyle, and you leave 40 to your kids.
Got it.
That's the idea.
Okay, so then just to break that down, because what you're referring to here is obviously it's an intelligent investment strategy versus also just to explain this a different way. You've defined this as 40 million because of the way that you can live off that money. And so can you just define that a little bit more? Because I do actually understand what you're talking about, but maybe not everyone does. Because initially when you said 40, I'm like, what's you have to draw that down every month, but every year rather. But you're not saying that. You're saying you're investing it in the market and you're living off the returns from the market investing of 40 million so that, you know, you're not going below 40 million at any point.
Basically, in any country, like Western country in the world, you can assume that a reasonably safe investment strategy. So in the UK, for example, you do a mix of like very low risk bonds and high dividends paying shares. So basically you invest your money and 5%, it's pretty reasonable.
Yep.
Yeah, so the idea is like the only way when you reach to, and believe me, I'm talking from experience, unfortunately, and for lots of people I know, it's hard not to spend your money. It's hard when you get a 40 million check to not want to buy a 20 million house,
Yeah.
but you can't.
Yeah.
You can't. If you want a 40 million house, then you need more than 40 million.
Yeah.
Because the only way to live quietly, especially if you sell, like if you sell when you're 90, you probably don't care so much. But usually you'll sell when you still have a few years to live, and usually you have kids, right?
Yeah.
And you want to leave something to your kids. So the idea is to get to a number where you can never again touch that money.
Yeah.
So you have 40 million in your bank account. When you die, there's still 40 million in your bank account. So that's why it's that number.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Alexis, at some point, I'll exit my company. I'm not in a rush, but you know, at some point, it's a consumer brand. It's called Heights, and we're just about to do. You know, we're on track to do 10 million a year, and started 4 years ago. So started in 2020. So it's a nice growth rate, nice trajectory. Borderline profitable. I would be profitable the last 7 months. We weren't profitable last month because growth was good, and so we decided to invest more in marketing. Obviously aware that we would need to focus on EBITDA if we want to be serious about an exit. So let's just say that I'm coming to you for advice. I want to do an exit and I'm considering PE. What do I need to know? What are you going to advise me other than wait a couple of years and come back to me when you're serious?
First of all, I'm going to ask you two questions to define if I can have a mandate and what's the scope of the mandate. First of all is what's your number?
So is that a personal number or is that
personal
company number?
I don't care about your company. I care about you.
Fascinating.
What's your number? The reason I'm going to ask you that...
Well, I shouldn't have asked you what the fact is before having a number.
Well, most of my clients, I bring them to a number of 100 million, actually. Because it's
but not
really
personal
good.
100 million.
Yeah, personal.
Oh, personal 100 million.
Yeah, the 100 million exit is personal, right?
Okay, but so does that mean because most of your... So I've had investors.
Yes.
And the numbers you were talking about in your conversation, they felt like they were working towards 100 million exit versus 100 million personal exit.
Oh, okay.
In your case, that's obviously the same when you own 100% of the business. But in my case, I own more like 25% of the business. I've got one co-founder, roughly 50% and investors. The thing that we've got going for us is control. So we've got voting control. So we have a unique setup, I would say, more unique than others in this situation. But anyway.
Okay,
but to get to 100 million is...
That's a conversation for later, but I would probably try to clean the cap table before a PE exit. Get rid of your investors earlier. But
how so? How would one do that? Because a lot of people listening will have investors. So how do they do that? How do you clean a cap table prior to a private equity?
Well, you buy them back.
Right.
You buy them back by the profit of the company. Depending who they are, it might be it's easier if they're angels. It might be a little bit trickier if they're VC. But anyway, actually that's a detail. I'm gonna see what's the number for you with your investor. So how much do I need to grow your company to get you to that number?
Sure.
That's the first point. In your case, I already have the answer, but actually that's the second question. The first question is, are you a lifestyle business or are you a growth business? And that's the number one question, right?
And how does one know?
Well,
what self-awareness do I need?
It's a decision. Actually, it's a decision. Like, there are very, very strong hints. I'll tell you about a company I'm advising with, a software company, right? Brilliant, beautiful company, making, I think, 10 million revenue, 1 million EBITDA. Wow. Like, why is he making 1 million EBITDA? What's wrong? The founder is taking $1 million salary. All the cars of the kids' cars and the nephews' cars, everything is in the company. And the company is growing, but slowly. And that's pretty much a lifestyle business. The owner, she's very happy with that. She said, well, I'm making $1 million per year. I have no cost. And my son is going to take over. Perfectly fine.
Just wait until she finds out she needs 2 million.
No, she's okay. She's 1 million, and half of the spending is in the company, right? Every time they travel with the company, and so it's 1 million, but no cost, basically.
Yeah, it sounds amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, and
highly tax efficient that way.
Depend on the country up until you get caught. But highly tax efficient. And in her case, the succession is clear. The kids are in the company. So it's a lifestyle business. That's fantastic. Just there's nothing I can do for you. You run that perfectly. The only skill you need in a lifestyle business is operational efficiency, because you need to extract as many profit as you can from the company, whether it's in directly to you or in dividends, and tax efficiencies, which it's not my skill set. A growth business, I would like to see the founders taking the absolute minimum livable salary, and I'm going to bitch slap you if you take a penny in dividend, right? Because that's not what you do. You grow.
Then we're that for sure.
I know that's why I didn't ask the question, but that would be to a new client. That would be my first question. So first question is lifestyle versus growth. Second one is your number. So let's say in your case we bring the company to 100 million, and the next question is how much time do I have? It's usually gonna be between 2 or 4 years. I don't do 10-year plans. I suck at it. It's not what I'm good at. And
no one's good at 10-year plans.
No one. I totally believe in that. But if your company cannot grow to 100 million valuation, which is depending on the market, but roughly 10 million EBITDA in 4 years, then you're doing something wrong, right? Then maybe you are a lifetime business. Yeah.
So can you just define EBITDA so people aren't confused, just in case there are listeners being like,
basically it's your profits before tax, depreciation, and amortization. So it's the difference between your cost, actual out-of-pocket cost, and your spend, your revenue. And so basically, to go back to your question, how long, I'll bring you to 10 million between 2 or 4 years, depending on the market and the value. And then I have a methodology, right, that I apply to my clients. That's my son found the name. I'm really proud of him. It's called Apex. So assess the company. There is a few like common points, but like, do you know your numbers? I ask you the question, do you know your numbers?
Broadly so, yeah.
Yeah, I bet you don't know your numbers.
I probably don't know it to a financial
You don't
inspection.
know your numbers. And that's the first thing. Like so many founders don't know their number. And that's one thing. That's the one thing, probably the only thing I was good at before private equity. And that was a big part of the success of the deal is I actually knew my number.
Although I suppose as long as one of you does, my business partner is an ex-accountant.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. If you
so
know
always good to have either a lawyer or an accountant as a business partner.
Having that, up until something goes wrong. But you're the CEO, right?
Yeah.
So you should know your numbers.
Yeah, I broadly do, but I know that I would fall apart in a proper
inspection. If you were my client, I'll nag you with that.
Yeah.
I'll nag you to that you have a monthly clear view of your number.
But then equally, I suppose I'm not optimizing for that right now. And so I'm not defending that I shouldn't know my numbers. I should know all of them. But I suppose at different points in your life as a founder and CEO, you need to focus on what the actual goals are for that year or that next 24 months. And exit isn't one of those things right now, if that makes sense.
That's a mistake.
Do you think so? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Like, I'm not saying think exit when you're not profitable or where you're grinding, but now you said with the number you said and you being profitable, now you should really have exit in mind.
Yeah, fair.
So we're going to assess.
Well, I suppose to your point, sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I suppose to your point of if it's a 2 to 4 year process, then it makes perfect sense to start to get everything in mind.
Yeah, it's like, keep in mind that from the moment you get the phone call or you start your selling process to the moment the money hit your account, could be a year, like 6-9 months. Mine was fast, but it's not always that fast. So assess your company. What's your unique selling proposal? What's your do you measure your client satisfaction? Do you measure it properly? Do you talk to your client? Do you actually physically sit and talk with your client? All that stuff. So that's a process. And then we're going to plan. Like, okay, so how do we get from, you said one? No, you said break even. How do we get from break even to 10 million EBITDA in 4 years? What are the steps? In most cases, I'm going to nag you to do an acquisition.
Interesting.
I love M&A. It's such a fast and
just define M&A. What does that mean?
Well, merger and acquisition. I love. So that one of the conversations I have with my founders is really acquire earlier than you think. It's a fantastic new access. I'd say 90%, well, maybe not 90, but 80% of our growth was external acquisitions. Wow. It's so easy money, right? You have $500,000 in your war chest. You can buy a 2 million, a 2.5 million company, and suddenly you just bought 500,000 EBITDA with banks' money, pretty much. So it's really, really efficient. So we're going to plan, and then we're going to execute the plan. Every 6 months, we're going to completely change the plan because life happens. Like, have a plan, but don't fall in love with your plan. That's something like I always say. And then we're going to start talking about exit.
So the A is assess, the P is plan.
E is execute.
No, the A is assess.
Yeah.
The P is plan.
Yes.
Okay, and the E is execute.
And the X is exit.
Right.
It's a cheat.
Yeah.
And then we're going to like, I'd say when we target 10 million, I say when we get to 8, even a little bit before, start working on the exit.
Okay, one more break. When we come back, we're going to uncover the secrets to crafting a killer sales deck that will have private equity firms lining up to buy your company. We'll also explore the challenges of selling a distressed business to PE and how Alexis managed to do it for a whopping 100 million. Be right back. Are you building a SaaS or venture-backed business? Or are you just trying to grow internationally? Well, if potential customers or investors haven't already asked you about ISO 27001, SOC 2, or GDPR compliance, they probably will soon. Achieving compliance can unlock major growth for your company, but the process is often time-intensive and costly. This is where our partner, Vanta, can help. Vanta automates up to 90% of compliance work, getting you audit ready in weeks instead of months and saving you significant costs. Plus, Vanta scales with your business, helping you successfully enter new markets, land bigger deals, and earn customers' trust. As a special offer, Secret Leaders listeners get 20% off Vanta when they go to vanta.com/secretleaders. That's VANT.com/secretleaders for 20% off. There's a link in the description.
I have a process to exit now that's like, first of all, we're going to do a deck, right? By the way, just a little segue. Lots of people will tell you, oh, don't look like you're selling, wait for them to... I think it's bullshit. It's like going with your wife to see a house and tell her, don't pretend you don't like it.
Yeah, you're already shopping.
Yeah, and also they don't really care. Like their
job is to buy you.
Yeah, their job is to buy you. It's a transaction. You don't want to appear desperate, but you're making profit. You're not going to appear desperate, right? Yeah. So we're going to do a deck. And then I'm going to send that deck to somebody who cannot buy you. I'll explain why. Let's say your company in the UK, I'm going to sell a deck to a friend of mine who would buy the exact same company, but in France, not in the UK. The reason I do that is because I get a free shot. So the guy, because he's my friend, he's going to go through the whole deck. He's going to say, that's bullshit, that's good, that's not good, that's bullshit, that needs more clarification. Get back, redo our deck with this advice, and then we send the deck to 3 PE who are potential buyer. If we did our job right, probably we'll get 3 letter of intent. Real life, maybe we'll get 1 or maybe 2. Then we get a LOE, and then we auction it, obviously. Then you send to 100 private equities, say, we have that deal, can you make it back, can you make better?
So is there any private equity that buys companies with revenue, not EBITDA? Or what are the circumstances that need to be true for that to happen?
It's not going to be strictly private equity. It's going to be a distress fund. I love distressed. Distressed is fantastic.
Okay, what is that? Sounds absolutely
it's
terrible.
Buying company who are not profitable or losing money.
Yeah.
If you're not profitable, then you're distressed, right? Because a company should be profitable.
Yeah.
And there are guys who are gonna buy your company because they think you're an asshole, pretty much. No, they think you're an idiot. That's why they buy your company.
Got it.
And like you break even, so you're doing something wrong. Either it's the market. In that case, they will not buy you, or they'll make the mistake of buying you. But most likely is you're doing something wrong and they think they can do it better. I love distress. It's fantastic, but it's exhausting. I will never do it again. I'm too old. But it's fantastic. I get called by distress fund to help, mainly where they realize, it's much harder than we thought.
What's the reason that you love it so much? Just because...
It's so interesting. It's so interesting.
But is what you've just said, the thesis, true? That usually those founders are idiots and that everyone can do it easier than them?
Always keep in mind exhaustion.
Yeah, energy.
Like energy. And in my case, I was being also experience. Like I keep saying that, which is a bit of a gimmick, but it's not far from being true. If I started New Access now, knowing what I know now, I would have sold 50 million more than 5 years earlier. Just at the cost of my mistakes. 50 million in 5 years. And like lots of stuff you don't know. And you don't know. And also exhaustion. Exhaustion, loneliness. I've seen so many. Loneliness is a big thing for founders. Like, you can have all the co-founders you want. You can have, at the end of the day, you're alone with the weight of your decisions, right? And you're tired. You're tired. You've been doing so much for so long. So that doesn't mean the guy's necessarily an idiot, but it's.
Yeah, okay. So you're saying that the people that come in and buy you in a distressed fund, they typically got good energy, they're at the peak of their career, broadly speaking, and they focus on your problem state.
Yeah, and they'll fire you, by the way.
And they fire you.
And they'll fire you.
Sure.
And that's.
But do you take anything from that? As in, so you sell to them and what? Like, so take us through a scenario like that. So you do a distressed exit. Do you as the founder get any money?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because if you don't get money, you don't sell.
Well,
right?
exactly. So what is a typical deal like that?
There's no, in distress, there's no typical deal. Like, it's very size related. The bigger it is, the easiest it is. But if you have a company that does, I don't know, 50 million and losing money, because break even is losing money, right?
Sure.
We don't kid ourselves. Then you'll get, I don't know, 10 million. Depend of the 10, 20, 50, it depends of the potential EBITDA. But you can sell, distress can buy very high if they see something you don't. Like, they can buy high.
Okay, so coming back to it. So we've worked together now for 2 to 3 years. I'm at 8 million EBITDA now. You're like, okay, now it's time to go to market. Then what?
We write the deck.
Yeah.
Right? So that's easy. But it's easy but non-trivial. You need somebody who's have a little bit of experience of doing that. Exactly what I described. We write the deck, we go talk to private equity, and we get the LOI, we auction it, and then we choose PE.
What happens with the process here? Are you speaking to a banker? Is it an advisor? Who has the contacts of all the PEs? Are you just doing it on LinkedIn? What is a normal process?
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble again. It's size related.
Yeah.
So there is a certain size where you kind of need an investment bank. So an investment bank is basically somebody who will take 1% of the transaction in exchange of doing nothing. But you still need them for...
Well, it sort of underwrites it, doesn't it? It gives it credibility
Give
and
it
safety
credibility.
on all sides. Yeah.
No, it doesn't give any safety. It's because the bank
But they
doesn't
do due diligence, no?
And you have a basic due diligence from the bank. But anyway, I do not believe that investment bank are necessary below 150 million.
Okay. So then, and I'm sure majority of deals happen on that, right? Because the larger the number, the fewer deals there are.
Yes.
So then the majority of deals happen under 150 million. So
no bank.
No bank.
Please.
So then what?
Then just you.
LinkedIn? Yeah.
I can guarantee you only one thing. You send a deck to a private equity, it's going to be read. That's simple. It's going to be read.
Interesting.
It's one of the rare cases of the universe where relationship helps, but not that much. Relationship helps getting you the perfect deck for the perfect P. But that's definitely not a bank's job. That's the job of somebody who knows P, ex-P guy, ex-exited founders. Like, for that part specifically, get help, but not from a bank. And completely stay away, please, from the consultant. Like, I met a client 2 weeks ago, and he said, well, I'm hesitant because I got in touch with KPMG, and they say they can help and advise, but they want £500,000 cash right now plus 1% of the sale, and I'm hesitant. So you're hesitant? Like, what do they need to put as a number for you not to be hesitant and realizing it's a rip-off? So just talk to people who know what they're doing and stay away from the consultant and the banks.
So other than the fact that there's 500 PEs and not that many strategic corporate acquirers, other than that fact, why is private equity a better option than a corporate buyout?
No, a corporate buyout it's actually on average, the corporate buyout deals are touch better. So it all goes down to what you want to do with the rest of your life. It's really the corporate buyouts are super easy to assess because, as I said, there are five guys. Like, I don't know what you do, but you know
we're in consumer, so ours would be like Unilever and P&G and Nestle, and you know, there's like I said, there's about five.
Yeah, there's about five.
There's just a handful.
And in the process, depending on what you want to do, just so you know, if you sell to Unilever, your career is over, right? I don't see you after being a founder for years or decades ending up being a vice assistant of sales for a region in Unilever, right?
Sure.
So if you want out, that's a good option. And also...
But what does that mean? So if you want out, what would normally happen? So let's say Unilever buy Heights.
Buy 100% and you're out.
They just buy 100% and you're out, you're not doing... You're usually doing an earn out, no?
Not necessarily. Why not? They're doing what? They don't need you.
Yeah.
Right? They don't need the CEO of a sub division, right? So...
But for a lot of founders, that's a dream scenario. You just talked about energy.
Yeah.
You know, for a lot of founders, it's like, I'm absolutely exhausted. Like,
I don't think it is, though. Honestly, I hear you. I slightly disagree. I think it's a part of you, and it's wrong. But a part of you sees that as a bit of your baby, right? Like you are emotionally attached. And the idea that you're going to have a little bit of a mourning period and like feeling that you can like basically be PE-owned for the rest of your life. And I know founders who like been through 3 or 4 Ps. And we had this conversation. I got out because wanted a new life. I had a new wife, a new kid. It's different, but we had conversation with the Ps. What are we doing now, and what's the next P is going to do, right? Because the P, the most important thing with P is they have a time horizon, right?
Okay, let's talk about that.
That's very important.
Yeah, what does this all mean? Okay, so we touched very lightly on corporate buyout.
Yeah.
To summarize, you're like, it can be good. Just assume it's 100% out. And you're probably out, and you can do whatever you want.
One last thing to add is corporate buyout, what we call strategic. What you get is what you get, right? Your check is you're never gonna get a penny more. With PE, you still have 20% that's gonna be worthwhile. In my case, the 23% I kept was way more. I made way more at the final exit than at the initial exit. Right. So P, typically a fund is 10 years.
Yeah. So I've sold for 100 million at this case to a private equity. Yeah. Now what?
Now they have, depending how soon in the life of their funds, and that's something you will know, they acquire you, they'll have to exit within 5 to 8 years. That's the max. They usually dislike being way more than 4 years. So basically, with them, you develop a 4-year plans that's gonna increase the EBITDA of your company. When I sold, I was break even. So after all I said, I sold break even.
So you were losing money?
Shitload of money.
By your own definition?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And we brought the company to 15 million EBITDA. That was the plan.
Quick question on that. How were you not a distressed exit then?
Okay, so I have to tell that story because it's like...
I love you're dropping this at this point in the interview. You're like, these guys are fucking idiots. They're distressed. The founder is shit. The break-even is losing money. Yeah. By the way, that's me.
Yeah, I was,
and it went really well.
I was all that.
Okay, well,
but
instead of depressing us, why don't you come here and inspire us? Tell us how good this can be.
If you talk to somebody who win the lottery, he's not going to tell you, I think what you should do in life is buy lottery tickets because that's how you'll become rich, right?
So you sort of got lucky in your unique scenario.
No, I got lucky and I learned a lot. So 2008, the company's making maybe 12, 13 million revenue, 2.5 million EBITDA, pretty regular, your boring software company, right? Business was selling software to banks. Then 2008, global financial crisis. We lost 75% of our revenue. fast forward to 2014. That's what it took us to recover. So 2014, the company was, okay, strictly to be very precise, it was the first time it was hitting break-even on a month-to-month basis. So we're not break-even yet, but like the month of April 2014 was the first profitable month in 6 years. And then the private equity call. They call every week, I never answer. And this one, I was working with my brother at the time. This one, my brother said, you should talk to these people. Said, why? And I don't know, they're French, you speak the same language, they're entrepreneurs, they're from the financial sector, they understand what, okay, pick up the phone, and the guys say, we're coming to Geneva next week. Okay, they're from Paris. Came to Geneva, go through the company. I've been super, super clear and super honest with them. I say, guys, I'm tired. I want to sell. There's no question. But now is not the right time. Come back in 2 years, and I promise you in 2 years you'll be my first phone call when the company is profitable. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do something a little bit different. You're going to go and you're going to write a business plan of where you're going to be in 2 years. I said, okay. And I did that. And obviously I was break even at the time, like losing money. And I put a business plan that I said that was going to be 2.5 million EBITDA in 2 years, and bring that to them. And the guy said, okay, this is the deal. We'll pay you 11 times your EBITDA from within 2 years, 85% cash and 15% earn out. And I say, okay, guys are nuts. And that's what happened. And the reason they did that, because they're not idiots at all, is they don't believe in your business plan for 1 second. It's just an exercise. But they know what they bring. And that's how I'd say the main case.
They know what they bring in terms of like the expertise of how to drive EBITDA.
Yeah, the expertise, the contacts, the knowledge, the people. And that obviously is not in your business plan. Yeah. So how they find hidden value is their own value that you don't obviously put in your business plan. So that's what happened. So I end up getting a check. 2 years later, a
check on 11x EBITDA, yeah?
11x EBITDA
in 2 years, yeah.
In 2 years.
But you got it up front.
Yes. And that was a funny story. Instead of calculating the earnout based on like hit target or something, they say, okay, we're going to do something really simple. We're going to calculate it as a percentage of EBITDA. So if you do less, you get less. If you do more, you get more. Okay, I end up getting more with the earnout that I did with the initial sell, because we went so over EBITDA. I think I had 2.5 million, and I think we'll get to 5 or something like that. So yeah, that was fantastic. So that's what happened. And then you're still sitting, in my case, in 23% of the shares. And so remember, 10%, 10 times EBITDA, give or take, I think it was 11 times, with very small EBITDA, no EBITDA at all, to the last exit that was over 150 million. Because they just M&A, right? Mainly M&A. Okay,
so you're through the period now, 10 years or whatever. You've sold the first time to private equity. You've got 4 years target, ideally, for what that private equity to improve things and sell to another private equity?
Yeah.
Or so just one giant pyramid all the way to the top?
No, the way to the top is IPO, right?
Right.
So
and so that's basically the path. Like one sells to the other, then the other, and at some point IPO.
In our case, it was one IPO, then strategic.
Right.
So they sold to a competitor, and that was the end of the company. That's the end of the company. So company ends in 3 ways, right? They get IPO'd. Well, they don't end, but they end for you as a founder. Or they get bankrupt, or they get sold to a competitor.
Okay.
Sold to PE doesn't end the company, right?
Yeah.
Because they sell the same shares they own.
Got it. Okay. What do you think the biggest obstacle to getting a successful private equity deal is? Assuming that the company has EBITDA and is relatively well run, and so the obvious stuff is kind of covered.
The company is well run and has profitable. I think the only obstacle is the founders not knowing what private equity is and getting scared. But there's no obstacles. Like PE will buy anything that's profitable. Anything that is profitable will find a PE. Like it's that simple.
Does that mean you've not heard horror stories?
Oh, there's tons of horror stories.
Well, scare us.
But, well, honestly, I cannot think of many stories where the PE end up losing.
Yeah, where the PE end up losing, right?
Well, that can happen, right? Like my PE, just before me, bought a company that, like, it was minuscule. It was, can I swear?
Yeah, I've been doing
it. It was a fucking shit show. Like, literally, the company was making, I think, 2 million revenue, 1 million loss. It was because they got literally fucked by the founder. Because it was so small, they didn't do a proper due diligence. They end up being actually probably they would have a legal case, but they usually don't do that, especially for so small. And I keep telling them, I said, like, listen, your fund is 100 million. You have 2 million in this. Just drop it, write it off. Say, we don't do that. We never do a write-off because we have to, if we do a write-off, we have to tell to the investors. So it's funny, one day I was presenting. So once a year, they do an investors presentation where all the investors are in the room. And usually they ask for one of the founders to present their own company. So I came, I present, and I saw the presentation, and they show all the participation with green, orange, red, and everybody was green. And this company who was fucked, had no chance of recovering, was orange. So we're still working a little bit on this one. And they end up obviously firing the founder. And actually I advised them, they put a friend of mine in there, and literally, like, through grind, in 2 years, they end up to sell it 5 times what they paid it. So the P, I don't know of many horror stories of the P, but keep in mind that the worst horror story is basically you are minority shareholder of your company and CEO now, right?
Yeah.
So basically your goal and PE goals are aligned, is to make maximum profit. Sometimes founders don't understand they're not the boss anymore. And that's where the horror story happened. You have a boss. You treat him properly, you report to him, and at the end of the day, you have conversation, but eventually you do as you're told, right? You have a boss. So the horror story is
which is kind of rare for a CEO to have a boss. Well, not rare, but you know what I mean? A CEO is supposed to be at the top of the tree. So yeah, there's a board, there's investors, there's stakeholders, and there's customers, and you always say, like, those are your bosses.
Yeah, that's bullshit. But no,
yeah,
the board,
right. Who is the official boss?
The shareholders, right? If the CEO of Apple is not the boss of Apple, the board is. They can fire him, right?
Yeah.
And it's actually unusual due to small size of company that the CEO is actually the boss. The CEO is the boss of the executive, right?
Yeah.
He's not the boss of the company. The owners are.
Yeah.
So the worst that can happen is you get fired, right?
Yeah.
It's the worst. That's the horror story. You get fired because you don't align, because you don't do what's told. And
yeah.
So we had animated conversation with the GP. We would meet once a month, sometimes a little more, and we were usually aligned. When there was a disagreement, mostly he was right and I was wrong, and he managed to convince me. Couple of times, the only time we had a strong disagreement is I wanted to switch the company to a different model. And he said, I agree, it's a good idea, but we don't have enough time because that's going to cost us 2 years deep in EBITDA, and I cannot do that. So prepare that, and you'll do it with the next P.
Got it.
That makes sense. So the big difference between you as a founder and a PE is you have you have no time horizon, right?
Yeah.
You can do a 5-year strategy.
Yeah.
I think it's bullshit, but you can do it. They can't.
Got it.
They can't. Unless there are very few called evergreen funds. The funds that do not have time period.
They're rare.
But they're rare. And I hate them.
Okay, so we're getting really into the nuts and bolts of actually making sure this deal happens now. So sort of dressing the bride, as you call it. So what does that really mean? So you talk about it in your book. What does it mean to be dressing the bride?
That's the step you do just before you do your deck, right? It's basically get your number to look as beautiful as they can just before you do your deck.
Simple, just add a 0.
No, because you'll get caught.
Yeah.
So the one thing, that's one advice I give that I really, really strongly believe in. You can dream as much as you want about the future. You could add 10 zeros in the future in your plans, because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to believe you or not.
Yep.
But when you talk about the past, you do one little thing, they'll find it. You try to hide a penny, they'll find it. They're really good at what they do. They've been doing due diligence, especially financial due diligence. The people who do that are very, very good.
So you're playing with masters.
Yeah.
And you're a novice because you've only done it for the first time and they do it as a career.
Yeah, and you'll get caught. And also, you always carry future responsibilities. So the thing will show up in a year. That actually happened to me. That's nobody's fault, but I had tax things that I disclosed, but in the contract I was still responsible, which makes sense that if you have a tax in the past, as a founder, you have to pay it. And I end up not paying it. We actually folded it in another deal. But so now don't cheat ever, ever, ever. Not even a penny. They'll find it. Also, it's evil, but that's another question.
Don't be evil.
Don't be evil.
No.
But you have tons of strategies you can do to make your numbers better. One is like, that's my P friends who actually say that's what they do a lot, is throwing the sailors off the boat, right? You fire 10% of your staff and it has no impact on your top line because the boat is still going, right? You do a very, very proper nominal EBITDA. You call your clients. That's one thing I'm doing anyway every year. Call your clients, say, hey, that's the year I'm selling the company. It would be really good for me to have a good deal this year. All that kind of stuff, that's called dressing the bride. It's absolutely not illegal. It's absolutely not even goes against the P's interest. But yeah, you dress the bride.
Okay, so you talk about dressing the bride, talking to your clients, maybe letting go some of the staff. Like, how extreme does one go in this situation?
Well, I'll give you an example, right? After I sold, it was actually the GP who did that because he was a fantastic cost cutter. And he went through all our number. And keep in mind, it was after the financial crisis. So we were really to the bone. And I've been honest to them. I said, we are to the bone. There is no cost cutting to be done. And they said, well, I'll do $1 million of cost cutting. I said, no way. I said, you try, but there's no way. He went and there was lease line that we had, internet lease line that we had between our office in Singapore and our office in Geneva. I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was somewhere around $250,000 per year. And he said, why are we paying $250,000 for that thing? I said, well, there have been millions of conversations with the engineers. It's absolutely necessary because there is a 1 second lag between Singapore and Geneva if you go through regular internet, and then there's the something development servers were not syncing. And I believed them. I knew what they were talking about. I was not like, I'm not a Luddite. I'm a tech guy. So I agreed with them. The guy said, okay, let's try that. He picked up his phone, he called the CFO and said, you cancel the contract on the lease line effective in 2 months. Then the CTO stormed in, huffing and puffing and really explaining, and very, very validly, I really agree with him how it was impossible. And the guy looked at him and said, I agree with you. Just The lease line is going to be cut in 2 months.
Yeah.
And they find a workaround, and we had no problem. So that's 250,000 saving per year. If I did that before I sold, that's 2.5 million more in my pocket, right? So that's what I call dressing the bride. Like, be very aware of every penny you save right now is 10 in your pocket, right? Because they pay 10 times EBITDA.
Yeah.
So like they would make fun of me. For instance, during all the process when I'll fly to Paris, I'll never expense my plane ticket. And they say, why you do that? I say, because if I pay, it's £100 now. If you pay me back, if I wait, £1,000. You pay me back when you do the deal, right? So it's like they made so much fun of me with that. So yeah, that's all part of dressing the bride. Be sure like you extract all the value you can from
basically
this company.
save every single possible penny in the year and in leading up to it.
That doesn't affect your top line.
Yeah. Okay. So red flags, when would I want to walk away? Like what would need to be true for me to be like, no, I'm not doing this deal, guys?
For me, the first thing, if you don't like the guy.
Yeah.
That sounds ridiculous, but you have 2 lunches with the guys and you don't like them.
Yeah.
Walk away, because they're going to be your bosses, right? For me, the big flag is the fish and chip. That's, for me, it's a big no-no.
Yeah.
Because I think it's actually taking advantage of your partner weakness. I don't like that. If the 3 guys you talk to say, oh, they fired me within 3 months, they were all liars. And for me, lying is really bad. I don't do that, and I don't like being lied to. So whatever like is your red flags as a human being, right? Like, but just be sure you understand these people's goal. These people's goal is money. They don't care about anything else.
Yeah. So basically, time to adult properly, but make sure that if you've got values that are really important to you, they're reflected in the people that you'll be working with.
Absolutely. If you're an ESG guy, go with an ESG fund. That's super important. Yeah, it's value. Basically human values. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so to summarize, I've understood, I suppose, the rose-tinted goggles version of why PE is actually a great opportunity. And I think the broad understanding of that is there's just a lot more players in the market, so it gives you a bigger surface area of luck for your conversations. And then really understanding like the A to Z. So going through the process of getting EBITDA in the first place and not putting themselves in your situation where you're losing money at break even, but then building it up with a plan, sort of 2 to 4 year plan of building up as much humanly possible, because you're probably going to get a multiple anywhere between 10 and 20, depending on your industry, obviously. And so your process, your place in this is usually to advise founders as well, like particularly, like you said, not to miss out whilst dressing the bride on stripping out 250k of costs that could make you 2.5 million quid. So being really meticulous, as long as we're driving the top line revenue and obviously EBITDA margins, making sure that business you possibly can during that process, meet all the available suitors, make sure that there's chemistry, and then I suppose run through the process methodically, patiently, and try and meet eye to eye. And I think most important thing that I've understood here is actually, if you've got red flags and you've got hard lines and you've got values and you've got things that you know are important, identify them for yourselves, but also actually communicate them to the buyers. Yeah. And then make sure that whilst you're doing the references, that those are part of your questions. I think that's the thing that I've actually really taken away here is if I had reservations about who I'd be working with, I'd want to make sure they're in my list of questions. Do they behave like X, Y, and Z or not? Are they going to be aligned with my values or not? And all of that being said, know that it's a financial deal. So one way or another, they're in it to make more money. So all this other stuff might be important to me, not as important to them. So I have to try and find the right way to make sure that this is all balanced. Is that roughly right?
Could have said it better myself.
Amazing. Demonstration that I've been listening. Yeah. Alexis, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure, man.